Welcome to today's deep dive. Usually, when you find a key out in the real world, its purpose is incredibly binary. Like it is very straightforward.
Right, yeah.
It opens your front door or it doesn't, or it starts your car ignition, or the engine just stays dead. You try it, the tumbler clicks, and you are in.
Yeah, exactly. A standard key is really just a tool designed to solve a very specific physical problem. There's zero ambiguity to it. You don't really sit around and philosophize about a padlock.
No, definitely not. But today, we are looking at this brilliant blueprint that's wrapped in a modern fable. It's a story where a key doesn't actually open a lock, but rather it shatters our entire framework for how we process
It
information.
really does.
Our source material today is a beautifully constructed story called Leela and the Garden of Lost Questions. And I want to say right up front, if you are currently navigating that modern nightmare of information overload, or maybe you are trying to master a complex new skill, or honestly, if you're just feeling creatively burnt out, this deep dive is tailored to help you completely reframe how you handle the unknown.
Which is something we all struggle with, especially now.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this.
We really should start with the environment the author builds here, because the setting does a tremendous amount of heavy lifting for the actual themes we're going to explore.
Yeah, the physical world reflects the whole cognitive state, right?
Exactly. The physical world of this story is a direct reflection of the cognitive state the text advocates for.
So the story begins in this place called Brisamar. It is this idyllic little village nestled by these majestic blue mountains. It has these colorful roofs and winding stone streets.
It sounds perfect.
It does. But the detail that really sets the tone is the wind. The villagers believe that the wind in Brisamar is an old storyteller, and crucially, it is a storyteller who never repeats an adventure.
And that personification of the wind is just a brilliant way to establish an environment of constant creative flux.
Yeah.
It sets up a world where every breeze is essentially an influx of new data. It suggests that impermanence isn't something to fear. It is just an ongoing narrative. The village actually embraces the fact that things change.
Right. So living in the very last house of this village is our protagonist, a young girl named Leela. She has this relentless, almost compulsive habit of asking unanswerable questions.
Not just everyday questions either.
No, like she is not asking for directions to the bakery. She's asking things like, why do stars blink? Or where do leaves go when they fall into the river? And my personal favorite, she asks, do trees dream?
Which are questions that adults usually just brush off.
Oh, totally.
And they brush them off because those inquiries create a friction that adults are, frankly, conditioned to avoid. When you ask an adult a question they cannot answer, it often triggers this deep sense of inadequacy.
Because we are trained to value the quick, satisfying answer.
Exactly. We want the bottom line. But the text makes a point to note that nobody's inability to provide an answer ever stopped Leela from looking for one.
And her persistence pays off, but not at all in the way she expects. One morning, wandering out in the forest, Leela finds a glowing golden key. It is lying right between the roots of this giant oak tree.
A glowing key.
Yeah, the source text actually describes it as shining so brightly it looked like it held a little piece of the sun. She asks out loud if anyone lost it, and when she is just met with silence, she picks it up.
She takes ownership of this unknown object without even knowing its utility, which, that is a massive leap for most people right there.
Right. I look at how Leela carries this magical key around for days, and it feels to me like the perfect metaphor for the learning process.
Oh, how so?
Well, she tries it on everything. Doors, chests, cabinets. She even tries to unlock the doghouse. She's just carrying it, waiting. I think about my own computer desktop, which is always littered with random bookmarks, half-read articles, weird historical facts.
Yeah, the digital clutter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You stumble across a highly complex, abstract idea, and you just don't know what to do with it yet.
Yeah.
You just hold on to it in your brain, waiting for the exact right context to finally unlock its meaning.
You are describing the acquisition of mental frameworks there.
Yeah.
Often we pick up a new way of thinking or a fascinating piece of trivia, and it just sits in our cognitive toolkit. To an outside observer, holding on to that seems useless.
Looks like a waste of time.
Right.
Right.
But the brain is constantly running background processes, scanning the environment for the specific problem that matches the shape of the tool you just picked up.
And the moment the tumbler finally aligns for Leela happens on a rainy afternoon in the woods. She hears this incredibly delicate sound, just a quiet bell going clam.
Just a tiny sound.
Yeah, and she follows it and finds a freestanding wooden door sitting right in the middle of the forest, wedged between two giant stones. No walls, Just a door standing in the middle of nowhere.
A threshold that just exists independent of any structure.
So she steps up, the glowing key fits perfectly,
Yeah.
and she turns the lock. She walks through and steps into this impossible magical ecosystem. The text paints this incredibly vivid picture.
It really is beautiful.
There are flowers that change color based on whether someone is smiling, butterflies with wings as transparent as glass, and streams of water that curve in ways that form glowing, deliberate designs.
The most crucial element of this new environment, however, is the communication network.
Yes.
Everything in this ecosystem has a voice. It is a fully communicative world.
All the animals talk. She is immediately greeted by a rabbit wearing a tiny blue hat, and his name is Bento.
Naturally.
Naturally. He casually tells her she is late. Leela is shocked he can speak, but Bento nonchalantly explains that everything talks here, even the stones.
Oh, the stars.
Yeah, but the stones speak so slowly that it takes them all day just to get out one greeting. Sure enough, a stone chimes in with this agonizingly drawn-out, "Good afternoon."
The slow-talking stones are a fantastic detail because they represent the necessary friction of slow processing.
They really do.
In a world obsessed with instant feedback, the stones require absolute patience just to hear a basic pleasantry. But Bento then reveals the actual function of this realm, which shifts the story from a simple fairy tale into a deep philosophical model. He tells Leela they are in the Garden of Lost Questions.
Bento explains the mechanics of this place, and the underlying logic is profound. Whenever a child out in the real world asks a question that adults simply cannot answer, that question doesn't just disappear.
No, it travels.
Right, it arrives here in this garden in the form of a seed.
What's fascinating here is how this completely upends how our society usually frames ignorance. Think about the modern educational system, or corporate culture for that matter.
Oh, absolutely.
An unanswered question is almost universally treated as a failure. A blank space on a test is a penalty. If you don't know the answer in a meeting, you are perceived as unprepared. We treat the unknown as a dead end, like a void.
But the garden repositions the unknown as something living. By framing an unanswered question as a seed, the text is telling us that a lack of an answer is actually fertile ground.
Yes.
These seeds are planted and they grow into massive, thematic trees. There is a tree that only produces questions about the sky, another for questions about the sea, and another holding the mysteries of dreams.
It creates a literal ecology of curiosity. The questions are not problems demanding immediate eradication, right? The environment sustains itself on what is not yet understood.
Which raises a really interesting logistical issue. What do the inhabitants of an ecosystem made of the unknown actually do while they're waiting for all these question seeds to grow? Like, how do you pass the time?
Right, what's the daily routine?
Well, they organize sporting events.
Specifically, a race that completely deconstructs the concept of a finish line.
Yes. Leela and Bento come across a family of turtles organizing this race. But the rules are totally inverted. The winner is not the turtle who crosses the finish line first.
Not at all.
The winner is the turtle who manages to observe the most things along the way. One turtle stops running just to admire a flower. Another halts to help a ladybug safely cross over a branch. A third just stops and stares up at the clouds.
I love that visual.
And when the race ends, there is no first place based on speed. They receive medals based on engagement. They get the Medal of Kindness, the Medal of Curiosity, and the Medal of Patience.
They are rewarded for maximizing their interaction with the journey, rather than minimizing their time to the destination. It is a direct critique of how we usually measure progress.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second, because translating this to your life as a listener gets messy. It sounds wonderful for a magical turtle, but in the real world, you and I have hard deadlines.
Sure, practical realities.
Right. We have bosses waiting on quarterly reports or final exams we have to pass. When we need information, we often just need the bottom line, and we need it yesterday. So how do we actually apply this mentality when modern survival demands absolute speed?
That tension is exactly why the turtle race matters. Look, if your goal is mere data extraction, if you just need to know what time a train leaves or what the quarterly earnings were, then yes, rush to the finish line.
Get the answer.
Right. But if your goal is true comprehension, if you want to actually master a complex subject or innovate in your field, rushing strips away the context.
Makes sense.
The flowers, the ladybugs, the clouds in this story, they represent peripheral knowledge and nuance.
Right.
Innovation almost never comes from staring directly at the bottom line. It comes from connecting the peripheral dots that everyone else sprinted past because they were too focused on the deadline.
The context is the actual prize. I see that. When you strip away the surrounding environment just to get to the answer faster, you don't really understand the answer you arrive at. But that doesn't mean answers don't matter at all. The garden does have a mechanism for answers, centralized in one massive piece of flora, which is the golden tree.
A tree whose branches are heavy with luminous, glowing fruits that Bento identifies as answers.
But there is a massive catch to how this tree operates. A fruit only grows on this tree when someone learns something important entirely on their own. Leela points out that a lot of the glowing fruits on the tree are still really small, like they haven't ripened yet.
And the mechanism of the golden tree is vital here. An answer handed to you by someone else doesn't yield fruit in this garden.
It just stays small.
Right. The human brain requires the fiction of the struggle to actually retain the knowledge. If I just give you the solution to a complex math problem, you haven't learned math, you have just memorized a string of numbers. The fruit remains small because the struggle of self-discovery was bypassed.
I think about times in my own career where I was handed the, unripened fruit. Like, you get promoted into a position before you have truly learned the underlying skills. Or maybe you read a summary of a dense philosophical book instead of wrestling with the text yourself.
We all do that.
You technically have the answer, but it provides no real nourishment. It is small.
Precisely. And when Leela points out how many fruits are still small, Bento delivers the core thesis statement of the narrative. He smiles and says, if everyone knew everything, no one would have adventures.
It reestablishes that absolute certainty is a trap. But here's where it gets really interesting. Immediately after Bento says this, the ecosystem suffers a catastrophic collapse.
It happens so fast.
The sky suddenly darkens. The glowing flowers lose their color. The birds stop singing. An owl flies down and delivers terrifying news. The fountain of imagination is drying up.
The stakes become existential immediately. Without the fountain, no new questions will ever be born. And without new questions, discovery dies entirely.
This feels to me like a powerful parallel to what happens to a human mind experiencing severe information fatigue.
Oh, absolutely.
When you are just consuming endless high-velocity streams of data, reading headlines, scrolling feeds, absorbing opinions without pausing to process or wonder about any of it, your internal fountain of imagination runs dry. The story maps out exactly what happens to a society that stops wondering and only consumes. The color fades. The joy disappears.
The mind just becomes a barren landscape. To restore the flow of imagination, one has to actively rebuild the cognitive pathways that allow for curiosity, which is what Leela is tasked to do.
Right. The owl tells Leela that the only way to reboot the fountain is to find 3 specific crystals scattered across the magical world. And this quest isn't just a scavenger hunt. It is a framework.
It's a curriculum, really.
Yes. The journey for these crystals lays out the 3 essential psychological traits required for lifelong learning.
Let's examine the first trait. Leela must travel to a mountain of echoes to find the crystal of courage.
And it is a deeply psychological obstacle. Whenever anyone speaks, the mountain just repeats, I can't, I can't, I can't.
Just echoing your own self-doubt.
Exactly. To reach the crystal, Leela has to cross an incredibly narrow, terrifying bridge over a chasm. She takes it one agonizing step at a time. But the revelation happens when she finally reaches the other side.
What does she see?
She looks back and realizes the bridge was never actually dangerous. It was entirely structurally sound. It was strictly her anticipation of failure that made the crossing feel impossible. Once she conquers the projection of her own fear, the crystal of courage appears.
The barrier to learning a new skill is rarely the mechanical difficulty of the skill itself. The barrier is the ego's fear of looking foolish during the amateur phase. Crossing that bridge is the acceptance of your own temporary incompetence.
But the internal battle on that bridge only solves half the equation. Once you have the courage to try and learn, you immediately run into the sheer volume of what you don't know.
The scale of it.
You hit a structural limit to what one person can process. And that brings us to the Mirror Lake, where Leela finds the crystal of kindness.
She transitions from an internal obstacle to an external structural one.
At the lake, she finds a single little beaver trying to build a massive dam all by himself. He is struggling because the branches are simply too heavy for one creature to lift.
Poor guy.
Right. Leela doesn't stop to form a committee or draft a blueprint. She just jumps in the mud and helps him lift the wood. Her action initiates a collaborative cascade. Squirrels run down to help, ducks start paddling over branches, otters join in. The dam is finished collectively, the lake water glows green, and the crystal of kindness is revealed.
This redefines kindness from a mere social pleasantry into a mechanism for collective intellectual heavy lifting.
Wow, yeah.
Knowledge thrives in a collaborative community.
Yeah.
If you try to build your understanding of the world in total isolation, you will be crushed by the weight of the branches. Collaboration is how complex systems are understood and built.
Which leads to the final hurdle. You have the courage to start, you have the community to help you build, but inevitably you hit the plateau. You hit the phase where the progress just seems to stop.
The hardest part.
Leela travels to a field where it never dawns. The sky is permanently gray, the flowers are tightly closed, the soil looks dead. In the middle of this dreary field is an old gardener, meticulously planting seeds in the dark dirt.
A seemingly irrational act given the environment.
Leela asks him, "Why do you keep planting when there is no sun?" And the gardener looks at her and says, "Because hope works before the reward appears."
That is the crux of mastering anything difficult. The work must precede the evidence of the work's value.
I think about the listener trying to learn a new coding language, or a musical instrument, or maybe trying to rebuild a struggling business. You always hit that grueling middle phase.
Dip.
Yeah, the dip. You are putting in the hours, doing the reps in the dark, and you feel like you aren't getting anywhere. The gray field is the plateau phase of skill acquisition. You have to possess the hope to keep doing the work long before the reward of fluency actually shows up.
And in the story.
In the story, the moment the gardener speaks that truth, a single golden sunbeam breaks through the gray clouds. One flower opens, then another, then hundreds. In the center of that blooming field, the crystal of hope appears.
He literally manifests the dawn through the sheer persistence of his unseen labor. The action creates the condition, not the other way around.
So Leela gathers courage, kindness, and hope, and rushes back to the dry basin of the fountain of imagination. She and the animals place the crystals around the edge, and the text builds this incredible tension. For a few long seconds, absolutely nothing happens, complete, deafening silence.
The agonizing pause while a complex system reboots. You have input the correct commands, but you still have to wait for the machinery to catch up.
Then a single drop falls, then another. Suddenly, the water is rushing back, crystal clear and strong. The trees sway, the flowers regain their vivid colors, the butterflies take flight.
The system is back online.
Yes, and in a perfect moment of comedic timing, those slow-talking stones finally finish the sentence they started hours earlier. They say, "I knew it would work."
The environment is restored because the prerequisites for curiosity, courage, collaborative kindness, and resilient hope have been reinserted into the ecosystem.
But Leela's journey isn't quite over. Before she steps back through the freestanding door, Bento the rabbit gives her a tiny cloth pouch. Inside is a single golden seed.
The ultimate takeaway.
His instructions are incredibly specific. He tells her, "Plant it when you find someone who has stopped asking questions."
This is a major structural shift for the protagonist. She is no longer just a curious visitor exploring a magical realm. Bento is deputizing her as an active facilitator. She's being sent back to the real world to cure intellectual stagnation.
Leela steps back through the door, and as soon as she is back in her world, the door completely vanishes, as if it was never there. The story jumps forward in time. Leela grows up. She becomes an adult, but she retains that childhood spark.
She doesn't lose it.
No, she doesn't. The text details her specific method of interacting with the next generation. Whenever a child comes up to her and asks a difficult, unanswerable question, she doesn't just hand them the answer. Instead, she looks at them and asks, "What do you think?"
She is essentially forcing them to cultivate their own unripened fruit on the golden tree. By refusing to hand down a definitive answer, she creates the friction necessary for self-discovery. She's teaching them how to tolerate the unknown.
And the ultimate result of this seemingly simple teaching method transforms her entire world. The text reveals that years later, right in the center of the village of Brisamar, a glowing tree grows.
Just like the one in the garden.
Exactly. No one knows exactly how it got there, but its leaves shine in the morning sun, kids sit under it to invent stories, and most importantly, the adults in the village start asking questions again. Brisamar literally becomes a haven for curiosity, a place where learning is universally viewed as an adventure.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, she planted Bento's golden seed not in the physical dirt, but in the cultural bedrock of her community. By validating the questions rather than just supplying the answers, she completely rewired the way her society processes information.
When we pull all of this together, the actionable wisdom for you, the listener, is profound. This fable gives us a completely different operating system for the mind. First, it demands we stop viewing unanswered questions as failures or voids and start treating them as seeds, waiting for the right season to grow.
Second, it reminds us that true learning requires crossing the intimidating bridge of self-doubt. The fear of looking foolish is usually an illusion hiding the path forward.
Third, we have to embrace the collaborative kindness of the Mirror Lake. We have to share the heavy lifting of knowledge rather than trying to build the dam alone.
And finally, we must embody the resilient hope of the gardener. We have to trust the process of planting in the dark, knowing that the disciplined work matters long before the reward of understanding finally appears.
The next time you find yourself staring down a daunting stack of research, a complex problem at work, or you just feel totally burnt out by the relentless demand for instant answers, remember Bento the rabbit's words.
If we knew everything, there would be no adventure left to have.
So what does this all mean?
Well, the friction of the unknown is the only place where discovery actually occurs. A life without questions is a life without movement.
I want to leave you with a final thought, drawn straight from the whispering wind and the stone streets of Brisamar. The story ends by telling us, never be afraid to ask. Every great discovery began with a simple curiosity.
A beautiful sentiment.
It is. But think about this one lingering detail from the narrative. Leela left the magical realm. The freestanding door vanished forever. But what happened to that glowing golden key she originally found beneath the oak tree?
The text strongly implies that the key was left behind in our world.
The story suggests that the key might still be out there somewhere, lying in the roots of a tree or sitting on a dusty shelf, waiting for someone willing to open the next door of imagination. So I ask you directly, if you were walking through the mundane routine of your own life today, and you looked down and found that golden key, what door would you try to open first?
That is a question worth keeping as a seed.
Until next time, keep asking questions.